everyone, and welcome to the 2024 Miami Dolphins team preview. We're going through all the fantasy relevant stars. Will Tua Tagovailoa take an even bigger step forward? Tyreek Hill and or Jaylen Waddle? Can Raheem Mostert repeat his huge 2023 season? All that and much, much more. Betting markets, win totals, the whole 9 yards here over the next 30 minutes. So strap in. We got a lot to go over. I'm your host, Ian Harris, and joining me, as always, is none other than Fantasy Life Director of Analytics and all-around baller, Dwayne "The Rock" McFarland. And Dwayne, we got a lot to talk about for a team that at portions of last season looked like they were reinventing offensive football right before our eyes, but things got a little cold at the end, pun intended. Didn't quite work out the way the Dolphins were hoping for. And accordingly, I mean, my God, their last playoff win was 2002, maybe even later. It has been absolutely ridiculous at this point. I believe it's been later than that. I believe it's 25 years, and that's why Mike McDaniel has been setting all their meetings at the 25-minute mark on clocks, which is a wild thing to do, but, you know, we'll see if it gets the result they want. So certainly not the first AFC East head coach to maybe do a questionable leadership strategy.
Better idea. Go practice in Antarctica or something like that. Like go practice like somewhere it's already super cold. Like that's just the problem for the Dolphins. Like just fix that. What's this clock thing?
It really is, man. And again, I don't want to sit here and just try to completely, buy into this narrative. But honestly, Dwayne, at some point we have to address it, and we will with us, kicking things off here with Tua Tagovailoa. So skinny Tua this year certainly seems inevitable that he's going to be the next, $50 million plus per year quarterback that everyone immediately questions. But just based on the numbers, it's hard to disagree, man. Over these past two seasons, he is fifth in EPA per dropback, fourth in completion percentage over expected, first in PFF passing grade, second in passer rating and yards per attempt. So similar to Brock Purdy, you can argue that Tua is a system quarterback, but when he's engineering one of the best systems in the NFL, does it really matter? All that said, things have fallen off a cliff as the seasons have gone on. Seriously, man, over these past 2 years, 22.1 fantasy points per game in September, 18.7 in October, 16.9 in November, 14.1 in December, and just 10 in January. So smaller sample sizes with the last two, but we've seen it. Dwayne, is the weather stuff enough of a concern for you here, or is it more just the reality that we've seen Tua operate as one of the most efficient passers in the NFL, and we still haven't really gotten more than the borderline QB1 out of him in fantasy land?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just Tua. Like the Dolphins overall just seem to shut down when they go play in the cold. And this is a pretty long-running thing. Like I ignore a lot of splits, but it's kind of hard with the Dolphins, where they come from, super far down south and the type of weather they play in and when they have to go play in the cold. There definitely seems to be something to it. So I don't think you can just put it all on Tua. I think you can also put it on play calling. You can put it on Mike McDaniel. I think there's a lot going on here. As far as like, is Tua an elite quarterback and does he deserve elite money? No, like he's not. But this is the way the NFL is. What are you going to do? You've got Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle on your team right now, and Achane, who we'll get to in a second. You're just suddenly going to be like, oh, well, we'll just, punt the ball, and we're just going to not worry about quarterback. At least, you do have a guy that can come in and operate the system. So it'll be interesting to see where he winds up. He should not get Joe Burrow money. He should not get money like some of these other guys that I think we truly know are elite quarterbacks. But somewhere below that, that's just the way things are in the NFL right now. So I think he's going to get it. When I look at him, Ian, I think he's one of the best values on the board right now as far as fantasy goes. And at the end of the season, when you're trying to win all the money in a best ball tournament and you've got to go play in Cleveland, I mean, it could get dicey, but we can't always predict the weather. And to your point, maybe, just maybe, like they've got the weapons, maybe they can kick it. So with Tua, for me, I just look at the offense, and I look at how many yards passing per game they have, and I'm like, man, how are we getting this guy right now, like outside the top 12 quarterbacks? And you can not easily, but you can take Tyreek Hill in round 1, you can take Jaylen Waddle in round 2, you used to be able to get him round 3, pretty much a round 2 pick now, but you can get both of the pass catchers and potentially one of the running backs if you want, and get Tua. So not many elite passing games like this where you can actually get that stack so easily. The Bengals being one of the other ones. So Tua is a guy that I think he ranks appropriately right now in fantasy, but definitely I think there's upside. Like would it surprise me like if he posted a top 6 season? No. I mean, because we know how these pocket passers can do. It comes down to the touchdowns. And this is one of these offenses where would it surprise me at the end of the year if I looked up my holy crap, Tua threw 45 touchdowns. No, that wouldn't surprise me.
And I think that's where the argument comes in. I mean, you said it, outside the top 12 right now is ADP over Underdog Fantasy, QB 15, pick 124. I mean, the argument I think comes down to, like, is he a cheaper version of guys like Joe Burrow and CJ Stroud, or is he just a slightly more expensive Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, and Matthew Stafford? And based on those weapons, based on Mike McDaniel, based on this being a pass-first offense, I tend to lean more towards the latter, Dwayne. I'm with you. 45 passing touchdowns is a possibility, and it better be in fantasy land for a guy that has totaled 144 yards on the ground over the past 2 seasons. So again, maybe skinny Tua is going to be a bit more adept at taking off and rushing. But, Dwayne, I don't want to leave drafts with Tua as my first quarterback off the board. But man, anytime I'm getting Tyreek or Waddle, which I'm certainly not shying away from, he's absolutely a target late. And honestly, man, if I do find a way to, let's say, get a top 8 or 9 quarterback and then Tua, 100% done in best ball land.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Tua as my QB1 if I've taken both Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. At that point, as Pete likes to say, in your alternate universe that you've just imagined, you've got these guys going nuclear. So you just already made the bet. So at that point, I have no problem, honestly, with Tua as my QB1. I also don't have a problem with him in 3 quarterback builds, depending on when you're taking them, or 2 quarterback builds. If you're taking Tua and, like you mentioned, another guy like Goff, I'm okay with that as a 2 quarterback build. I might still tack on a guy later if there's really some value and I have some other stacks set up. But overall, you should think of him more as that high-end QB2 in fantasy.
And hey, maybe there is a step forward still to be had here, as much as we, really judge these quarterbacks on the last game they played. And it wasn't great in, that freezing Arrowhead environment. I mean, his performance really, man, in week 15 against the Jets without Tyreek Hill, only letting the ball hit the ground like 3 times all afternoon. Truly, truly great stuff from Tua. So still only 26 years old, man. If we see another step forward, again, this offense is really going to be humming even more so than they already are. But you mentioned one of the other speedy weapons in this offense, Dwayne, De'Von Achane. One of these players where if things go right for him really has the potential to break fantasy football. And we had a preview of that last season. 7.8 yards per carry. I know people have thrown the stat out there, but can we just sit here for a second and understand how freaking insane that is? Number 1 in the Super Bowl era. Number 2 all time. Shout out Bears running back Beatty Feathers for averaging 8.4 yards per carry back in that memorable 1934 campaign. So Dwayne didn't get a full season's worth of Achane. He was dealing with some injuries, but man, top 12 fantasy numbers in 5 of his 9 full games. That 56% rate was only bested by CMC, Kyron Williams, and Derrick Henry last year. So the question is what we see out of Achane in 2024, presumably alongside a healthy Raheem Mostert and maybe even 4th round pick, who is actually acquired via a future 3rd round pick, Jalen Wright.
Yeah, it's funny. I hear people, talk about Achane or like, oh man, he can't stay healthy, or oh, he's gonna have to split time with Mostert. Well, in the games you had a healthy Mostert last year, the dude averaged 19.8 fantasy points per game. So I don't know what to tell you. Is his efficiency probably going to come down? Yeah, but I think there's plenty of room for efficiency to come down and him still be the most electric running back in fantasy, or one of the top 3. You know what I mean? So 40% of the rushing attempts in those games with Mostert, 52% route participation, which was more than Mostert. So he is the guy that they did lean to a little bit more in the passing game. So look, 25% targets per route run. They're trying to get the ball to this guy when he's on the field. And we've already heard Mike McDaniel come out and say, I want to get Achane more involved in the passing game this year. Now, a lot of times that can just be coach speak, but it does make sense to me, Ian. Whenever you've got an electric player like Tyreek Hill, another electric player like Jaylen Waddle, the 3rd man is Achane. That is the next guy on the team that if I'm dialing things up specifically for players, I'm getting it to those 3. So the thing, here's what I would say with Achane. People that come out and say, oh man, he'll never get 50% of the carries. Again, people used to say that about Austin Eckler. People have said that over the history of time about all sorts of players. Jamal Charles was not a huge running back, and he was very similar to the style of Achane. So don't pretend that we know whether or not Achane is going to move into the lead position in this backfield. How would you feel, Ian, if you had been passing on Achane in the 3rd round all this time, and week 1 we're doing the utilization report, and it says, oh, Achane had 62% of the snaps? You're going to kill yourself. You're going to feel terrible. You're going to be like, I just lost my fantasy league. That's how you're going to feel. If we come out and we're like, oh, he had 40%, you're going to be like, okay, he's still going to come up. I need him to make his big plays, but that's what I was anticipating. So I think you really, with Achane, he he can break your fantasy season if you're wrong on him and you don't take him. He's one of those guys that you don't want to miss on.
And this is not something that we can say for many players, which again is why maybe you should be taking that chance. First or last, Dwayne, kind of seems like a good player to be going in with that. So don't underestimate just how fantasy friendly this offense is for the running backs. Like, yes, Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle are the guys getting a lot of the show, but last year only the Lions and 49ers had more team running back carries from inside the 5-yard line. No offense actually averaged more expected PPR points per game in their backfield. So yes, Achane got going plenty with that, and we expect him to be the lead back here. But Dwayne, Raheem Mostert isn't going anywhere. And when you do hear Mike McDaniel, just talking some of the pressers, he still asserts Mostert as their number one running back. So yes, he's old. I understand it. But in Miami, man, we've seen him go back-to-back seasons now with over 200 touches. And when you just actually go ahead and start comparing, again, the overall wear and tear with Mostert relative to some other running backs, 766 career regular season touches for Mostert. I mean, Derrick Henry has 2,100. Mixon has 1,800. Kamara has 1,800. Jacobs, Saquon, Aaron Jones are all double again. Close to double, 1,400 plus what we've seen from Mostert. So for you, Dwayne, I know you've been doing a lot of good work recently, more so wide receivers and tight ends in terms of, age cliffs and things like that. But how do you balance that with Mostert, where so many people seem to be, again, just I think weighing the age stuff and the injury, predicting this more so against Mostert. Okay, I agree, Mostert, because of his age and some of the injury history, probably has a higher chance of getting injured than some of these other guys. But I feel like a lot of people almost act like Mostert's a 9 out of 10 injury potential and everyone else is a 1 out of 10. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I say just embrace it, man, and draft this dude in round 9 where people are letting you draft him. Honestly, I don't mind drafting both Dolphins running backs when they're that far apart and they both did what they did last year. I get it. Let's make the bet on one or the other. And that's typically what I do. But I have a couple teams where I'm like, okay, you just want to give me both Dolphin backs. They were great playing together last year. And if I get either one of these dudes by themselves, watch out. It's going to be nuts. Jalen Wright, yes, was brought in. Very athletic player. He fits the Mike McDaniel type of player that we want to see, but it's not like he was a round 2 pick, so I think we kind of got to chill a little bit on that. But yeah, I'm with you with Mostert. He could hit an age cliff big time this year, but where you're going in draft, I think it's all baked in round 9.
And just looking at these offenses, Miami, Los Angeles Rams, San Francisco, if you don't find yourself taking the RB1, if you're on a team where you didn't get Achane, CMC, or Kyron, okay, now you don't have those guys on your team. So try to set yourself up for the best case scenario. If they don't actually ball out, guys like Mostert, guys like Blake Corum, guys like Elijah Mitchell would be the beneficiaries and certainly a lot more affordable accordingly. So now Tyreek Hill, look, he's incredible. The number 1 wide receiver here. You're going to see him off the board in the top 3 overall picks. And yeah, guess what? Dwayne and I agree with that sentiment. He is the wide receiver 1 in PPR points per game over these past 2 seasons after all. However, Dwayne, Jaylen Waddle is coming in hot, 2nd round pick right now. He is actually fantasy's most expensive number 2 wide receiver. So on the one hand, I mean, no wide receiver duo has more receiving yards over these past 2 seasons than Tyreek and Waddle. I get it. Waddle's 10th in yards per route run. He's tied for 8th in PFF receiving grade since 2021. He's really good. That said, to me, this is an A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith situation where Tyreek is the clear number 1 and Waddle is the number 2. And seeing, again, their price so close in fantasy land almost seems like more of a 1A, 1B projection. So what are your thoughts on Waddle going in round 2? Is he deserving of that high of fantasy treatment?
I think the market has it right. The round 2 thing is really coming down to best ball drafts. Yeah. That's what pushes the running backs up because you got to start 3. Most people want to flex 1, so that's 4. Everybody's trying to scramble for the wide receivers early. But if you look at where he's ranked overall, just going in the wide receiver rankings, I think it's good where Jaylen Waddle's going. You're getting him as a mid-range to low-end wide receiver 2. We know that it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. Like you mentioned, having Tyreek Hill on the team. Look, the most predictive year-over-year data point for saying what's the player going to do the next year is what they did PPR points per game the year before. And Jaylen Waddle has been a wide receiver 2 over the last 2 seasons. So I don't think that we can really debate that. But he's playing next to Tyreek Hill, so you got to look at the underlying data points. And they all say that he's a wide receiver 1. His yards per route run, 2.61. If you look at his target share with Tyreek Hill on the field, 26%, man. Ooh. That is a wide receiver 1. So I have no doubt in my mind. And with Tyreek off the field, dude, a 37% target share over the last 2 years, 3.80 yards per route run. I have no doubt Jaylen Waddle is a wide receiver one. That's his talent profile. He just happens to play with one of the best wide receivers we've seen in the last 20 years, and Tyreek Hill. But we have a great offense. They don't run three wide receivers that often, so it's very focused. So I love taking Jaylen Waddle. If something, knock on wood, we would never want this to happen, did happen to Tyreek Hill, and Jaylen Waddle was completely healthy, I think you immediately have a high-end wide receiver one on your hands.
Well, Dwayne, we did happen to actually get one example of that last year. Week 15 was the only game that Tyreek missed. And, Waddle, 8 catches, 142 yards, and a touchdown against the New York Football Jets. Not a bad performance there. So 1 game sample size, but yes, I'm with you when we are, picking between, again, a lot of those good, but, at least one red flag wide receivers in round 2. Jaylen Waddle does seem appropriately priced when we're in an offense with high efficiency and the willingness to just go ahead and embrace their top 2 pass game weapons. Only 3 NFL offenses last year had at least 50% of their total team targets go to 2 specific wide receivers: the Raiders, the Eagles, and yes, your Miami Dolphins as well. So good stuff there with Waddle. Now, Dwayne, we've mentioned Mike McDaniel and kind of things he's done in this offense. Tons of pre-snap motion. I mean, my God, you see every team after, week 4 or 5 last year starting to utilize some of the principles that McDaniel has brought to Miami. Run game, obviously, still doing their thing. So what have you seen from Mike McDaniel and Frank Smith, leading the fastest show on surf, greatest show on surf, whatever we want to call this great offense? And do you expect anything to change, remarkably in 2024, or are we just once again dealing with a probable top 10 scoring offense?
Yeah, your choice of words there are funny because they are the fastest with speed, but as far as how fast they run their plays, they're the slowest offense. Like they take forever to call their plays. They rotate their guys a lot. We have multiple games where Jaylen Waddle and Tyreek Hill only getting to 80% route participation. Like, could you imagine these guys if you let them both play 90%? But maybe that's part of the secret, right? He's rotating them off. They're coming out there fresh when they're back on the field, and teams already can't handle that speed, but when they're completely rested, like they're just dusting folks. So you already mentioned it. Like, he knows all the cheat code buttons. He's going to use his play action, going to use that motion. Mike McDaniel, he's very, very sharp when it comes to the type of things you scheme up pre-snap and right at the snap of the football to help a quarterback like Tua, who honestly isn't probably an above average quarterback, but he has him playing more at a superstar level many games because of the things he does. And obviously he's got the players to do it. So yeah, I mean, nothing new to say here with McDaniel other than we just love it.
And I do think this represents a scheme that is so good that it can probably make up for what could, again, be more of an average offensive line. PFF's 9th ranked O-line from a year ago. So they were, above average last season for sure, but only returning 3 starters. We'll see if Titans center Aaron Brewer and Houston offensive lineman Patrick Paul, their 2nd round pick, can step up in a hurry. So this takes us to the win total, Dwayne, currently resting at 9.5, minus 135 lean on the over. So slight underdogs, 2nd place in the division, plus 175. The Bills are actually the team sticking out right now to win the AFC East, which they have done, quite a few years in a row at this point. So I'm going to take the under here, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the offense. It's just more so, again, Tua's already been a top 5 quarterback in terms of passing efficiency. I'm not so sure there's another step for him to take. It's possible. I mentioned before, he's only 26. I'm not, trying to shit on Tua here, but the offense is already really good. It's this defense, man. Like, several of their key pass rushers are coming back from brutal season-ending injuries, and they also, life without Vic Fangio, and also, again, suffered some major losses in free agency as well. So overall thoughts on this Dolphins team, Dwayne, once again, dealing with a similar problem that we mentioned with the Bills, where it's like, yeah, Jets probably aren't going to be, as easy a step over, assuming Aaron Rodgers plays more than 3 snaps here in 2024.
Yeah, they've won 9, 9, and 11. Over the last, and they've pushed versus Vegas every year except last year. They hit the over. I'm going to take the over though. I think they can get to 10 wins here. You're getting them at 9.5. Right now, the market, it's minus 135 to take the over. So the market's, yeah, I like that. I'm liking that versus the plus 110 on the over or on the under. So look, I get it. I'm probably going against things here, but I think 10 wins is doable. And I agree with you on the Aaron Rodgers thing, but looking at Buffalo and what's going on with their offense and a potential little bit of a step back, I'll take the over at 10.
It's a good point. I picked the Dolphins to win the division last season, and they had their chance there in week 18. Alas, Ian was wrong again. But hopefully I'll be more right this weekend. When UFC 303 rolls around this Saturday in Vegas, could it get any better, people? It sure can. When you get on the action with our partners at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the UFC. Truly a banger of the card. Obviously, we got Poatan versus Yuri at the top, but man, even some of these just prelims are looking hot. I was talking to my buddies yesterday, and there are only 2 fights on the entire card with a favorite, I believe, over minus 300. And the entire main card, last time I checked, no one was even over minus 200. So really good chance to hopefully get some of those dogs barking. And what better place to go ahead and put your money where your mouth is than at DraftKings Sportsbook. So check this out. New customers who bet just $5 can get $150 back in bonus bets instantly. All you got to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use our code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. All right, Dwayne, 2 more kind of big pieces of this offense we want to break down. First of all, the position battle, the one kind of position battle going on, if you want to call it that, is going to be this wide receiver 3 slot. So they did bring in Odell Beckham Jr. It's a 1-year, $8.25 million deal, but as we see with most NFL contracts, in reality is worth quite a bit less. Just $3 million is guaranteed. That said, Braxton Berrios, I don't think did enough last season to be someone that we're just, expected to again take that starting slot role. Cedric Wilson Jr. is gone at this point, and they did use a 6th-round pick on Malik Washington, just the 184th player going off the board. But that said, Dwayne, I don't know about you, but when I was doing, some of the, more pre-draft research on wide receivers, you would see Malik Washington popping, in certain statistical studies. So maybe he could be, one of these, again, day 3 players to break out. Not saying he's the next freaking Puka Nacua. I don't think there's going to be another, Puka Nacua every single year here for a while. But overall thoughts on this wide receiver 3 battle, Dwayne?
I think Odell Beckham is cooked. I'm doing some research right now, on aging at wide receiver. Sorry. I'm just going to follow the data here. He has all the signs of someone you just don't want to mess with anymore. There's really no point in it. So with that said, if I am going to take somebody in the last round of a draft, it is Malik Washington. I also think, to your point, when you look at the specific skills that he did flash, and he didn't have the greatest profile in the rookie supermodel, but he fits what they like to do. Get the ball into the hands of guys that still have the juice, make the plays. I have a feeling that if Tyreek Hill or Jaylen Waddle went down, I don't think you would immediately see Odell Beckham Jr. step in to take over that role. I think they're going to use Odell Beckham Jr. when they know they need a guy that come out, try to beat some man coverage for them, get them a first down, maybe a big play here or there. But if they were actually scheming stuff up week to week with someone injured, I have a feeling, I know this sounds weird to say, even though this guy was a 6th-round pick, I have a feeling it would be Malik Washington. So he's the guy I've been taking a little bit more at the end of drafts. It's tough to say, but I will sprinkle him in.
I am a longtime OBJ stan, so keep that in
Me too,
mind,
man.
everyone. And look, regardless, we're talking about, if you're taking OBJ, you're taking him in the last freaking round anyway. So not the most, fantasy consequential decision here, but just to give him a little bit of credit, 11th most yards, drawn from defensive pass interference penalties last year, one of 10 wide receivers to average at least 16 yards per catch. No, I don't think he earned the $16 million or whatever the Ravens threw his way last year. But really, Dwayne, I remember talking to you, he was starting to step forward and he just never quite seemingly got the targets that his route rate was going up with down the end of the season. So it is what it is. Ultimately, I think the number 3 receiver here probably finishes 5th, maybe 6th in this offense in targets anyway, because as much as we have Tyreek, Waddle, Achane, I think this tight end could actually be one of fantasy's best deep sleepers. That's right, Arthur Smith's best friend, Jonnu Smith. And just to be clear, everyone, I don't think Arthur Smith was wrong for featuring Jonnu Smith last year. I'm upset about our Kyle Pitts bags as much as the next fantasy nerd. But look, Kyle Pitts really injured last season, trying to play through a knee injury that was much more complicated than we thought. Jonnu was tied for 10th in yards per route run. He was 4th in yards per catch, 3rd in yards per target among 24 qualified tight ends. ESPN Yak Score only had Isaiah Likely and George Kittle better. So responsible for next-gen stats, 2 fastest times by a tight end. Dwayne, this offense got even faster. I think Jonnu, man, even if he's not someone that we can say is going to get triple-digit targets, if there's anyone that can make the most out of 70 or 80 targets, it does seem like it's Jonnu Smith in this offense.
Yeah, and you like Jonnu's fit in the explosiveness of the offense.
Yeah.
You talked about Jonnu over the last 5 years has a 21% targets per route run, which is a number we like to look at when we know that the route participation hasn't been there, 1.63 yards per route run. So those are mid-range tight end 1 underlying data points. So I think the talent is there for Jonnu. The big hang up, Over the last 5 years, his max route participation has been 62%. Surprising, that was last year with the Falcons having to vie against Kyle Pitts. And whenever we look at this offense for the Dolphins, they run a lot of 21 personnel, which is a fullback and a tight end. And typically Mike McDaniel has leaned to the blocking tight end in that personnel group. So that's the thing we need to watch in training camp. Is Jonnu Smith getting out there and able to be on the field as a blocker? Because historically, he's not. He's just been the guy you put on the field whenever you're going into passing down situations. And the Dolphins don't use that stuff as much. They're not going to play him as much in the slot like a wide receiver. So it's a little bit of a challenge for me with Jonnu figuring out the playing time, but I definitely think that the talent's there. And if he does get on the field a little bit more and something were to happen again with, we don't want this with Tyreek Hill or Jaylen Waddle, he could easily be the number 2. Like, I think in this offense with play action targets, mismatches against linebackers, and them scheming extra things up through Mike McDaniel's offense, I would be pretty excited about Jonnu. In that scenario, I think he would definitely be a tight end 1.
Argument against Jonnu is the reality Dolphins tight ends ranked dead last in total targets since McDaniel got to town back in 2022. But I mean, McDaniel and the
they've
Dolphins,
also not been good.
Right, Durham Smythe. With all due respect to Durham Smythe and his family,
Mike Gesicki the first year, but that was Gesicki's problem. He couldn't get on the field though.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. No, but looking again, it's just he's so cheap, and I think you can make a legit argument that Jonnu is a top 16 or 17 tight end, pre-draft going into the season. He's going off the board as a tight end 25 right now.
He's my favorite late round tight end by far.
Yeah, man. Again, like when you're in this situation where, like Dwayne, if you get one of the top 7 elite tight ends that cuts off with George Kittle there, are you fine only having 2 and having that second one be either Jonnu or Noah Fant way later in drafts?
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody in that range, I'm fine. Or if if I don't get one of the elites, I like them to be one of my 3.
Yeah.
If I'm taking 3 tight ends.
There we go. So is that the line that you're kind of drawing after? Well, if you have to go Evan Ingram, David Njoku route, that's kind of when you go 3. Unless, I guess, if I get Jake Ferguson and Dallas Goedert, I'm kind of fine with that.
Yeah, it just depends like on the rest of your team, like and the strength. But overall, yeah, that's the line where you're typically starting to at least think about 3. But where I'm for sure doing 3 is if your first tight end, is a Dallas Goedert, or really actually even after that, right? If it's after Dallas Goedert, that's the line. I'm for sure drafting 3. If it's Dallas Goedert, Brock Bowers, one of those guys, I'm typically drafting 3, but I will sometimes still do 2 depending on what the draft's, presenting to us.
I had a high school science teacher who loved to answer every single question, starting with "it depends," to the point that one kid actually just submitted his final paper and only wrote "it depends." Teacher, teacher gave him an F after all, but he did tell him that he respected the move after the fact. So it depends, that is a reality.
You can say it depends, but you do have to follow it up with something.
That's true. You got to try to give some sort of rational thought after that. Just like we're going to try to do right here, as we always end all these team previews with an example of who the Dolphins might be if they were a TV or movie character. So I feel great about this one, Dwayne. It is absolutely Achane from the boys, the fastest team in football, just like this, the fastest man in the world. That said, all of a sudden, Achane gets a bad heart. All of a sudden, he can't run fast. And boy, oh boy, does he get average in a hurry. All of a sudden, he can't stand up to anyone. And all of a sudden, looking pretty worthless out there, just like the Dolphins have been in December and January over these past 2 seasons. So I'm done with season 3 of the boys at this point. So I have seen Achane get the new heart. I'm not so sure if that's coming for Miami, but man, if we can find a way to keep that speed grooving in January and this offense is all of a sudden looking like their usual selves, scary out for anyone to be dealing with in the playoffs. So thank you for your kind compliment there, Dwayne. Do you have another example?
Achane, I see what you did there. I like it. Yeah, I'm going to go with Jamie Lannister, his early career arc in Game of Thrones, when things really kind of had to be perfect or he almost had to cheat. Like, we knew he was a good fighter, right? We knew the guy obviously, came from money, well-trained. He's an athlete, but every time he gets into a skirmish, like someone helps him, like when he has to go up against Ned Stark, one of his guards come in and stab Ned in the back of, the hamstring, and he's hurt. You just see all the different things, but eventually Jamie gets much more gritty. He gets his freaking hand chopped off and still has to be awesome. So the question is, like, can we see that from the Dolphins? They're good when conditions, to your point, kind of going along the same thing you are here. Like when conditions are pristine and everything's nice, everybody's healthy, we're feeling good, get a little bit of help. from the football gods, things are great for the Dolphins. But when they get down to crunch time and things get nasty and you got to play and you got to, scratch out a win, things get dirty, the weather gets bad, can they take that next step and ultimately do what Jamie Lannister does later in his career, which show us that he has more grit than maybe we think early on?
It's a good thing Twitter wasn't around for some of those early Kingslayer years, man. Kingslayer and Anakin Skywalker, a.k.a. Darth Vader, win-loss records. I'm not sure they are necessarily matching the reputation that they hold over the years. So good stuff there. I want to thank everyone again for tuning into another edition of the Fantasy Life podcast. As always, you can check out my written team previews of all these squads on fantasylife.com, as well as Dwayne's projections and our team Fantasy Life consensus ranks. Again, all over there at fantasylife.com, where we also have a lovely free newsletter that you are more than welcome to subscribe to. So follow Fantasy Life on YouTube as we get you ready for draft season. If you feel like it, maybe even throw a like in there. It is a free country after all. So for Dwayne, for producer Matt, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in to the Fantasy Life podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.